Hello and welcome to episode number 51 from the Self-Publishing Formula.
Two writers, one just starting out, the other a bestseller. Join James Blatch and Mark Dawson and their amazing guests as they discuss how you can make a living telling stories. There's never been a better time to be a writer.
If you are watching on our YouTube channel, we've changed seats. So you're now David Letterman.
I am. Yes, I'm the funny one.
I'm Hey Now Hank Kingsley. Remember?
I don't remember that.
Hey Now Hank Kingsley. That was Gary Shandling's alter ego, the late Gary Shandling.
Yes, yeah, the Gary Shandling.
What was his name? Everyone's screaming at the podcast now because they all remember. Larry Sanders.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, Jeff Tambor brilliantly played Hank Kingsley. I loved that series. It's reasonably short-lived and didn't do very well in the UK, but
very influential post-fact.
Very influential. Well, Gary Shandling was all the way along, wasn't he? He did I remember the Gary Shandling show where he broke the fourth wall, and he was just a young comedian in his 20s doing a TV sitcom, but he kept speaking to camera saying, "Oh, this guy's coming around now." And what we had later was Seinfeld and The Office and Today Modern Family. I mean, literally, I think I did see an interview with him once. I think Jerry Seinfeld actually interviewed him for his comedians doing coffee in cars. And he said to him, "What do you think when everything you see on TV basically stems from what you did?" And he said, they loved each other. You know, when they saw each other, Gary Shandling said, "I love you." You know, he just really genuinely said that. And they hugged each other, and it was months after that Gary Shandling just died very suddenly, very sad. But influential, brilliant writing. Seinfeld for me still is the sitcom in terms of writing that you listen to that there's not a word out of place. Not a word is wasted in Seinfeld. Every sentence means something, moves the story along, moves you towards the comedy. And I know that Larry David talks about it being the most stressful period in his life, and in the end he really struggled to do it. But I'm so pleased that he did. He and Jerry did get that together because it's absolutely brilliant. Okay, enough reminiscing about comedy. We've got a masterclass today, which is exciting. So it's no interview per se. In this episode, we are going to be talking about reader surveys. So I think probably if you do a general introduction as to what they are and why we do them, and then certainly as somebody starting out who's not even begun that process yet, I'm going to be asking you lots of questions.
Yep, so I've been doing surveys for at least 2 years, maybe 3 years now, and I always do it over Christmas. It's something I look forward to Christmas time, because I know I'm going to survey my readers, and as my audience size has grown, I obviously get much more data back. And the reason I do that is because I want to know about my audience. I want to know who they are, whether they're male or female, what age they are, what they like, what they don't like. Because when I know that kind of information, it enables me to make educated decisions on what I'm going to be doing in the next year. So that could be, on the one hand, marketing. So it could be something that I know that my audience is a certain age, so I won't advertise to people below that age. That enables me to get more qualified clicks. Quite useful. Can mean that the cost of whatever I'm trying to do comes down because it's more efficient. It could also have an impact on the craft side of things. So if my audience tells me that they want more of one character and less of another, I can rejig my production schedule so that they get what they want. And I can test them on different ideas I might be thinking up and all that kind of good stuff.
So that's quite wide-ranging. I mean, I imagined before you answered that question that it was really just going to be about marketing, but actually it's editorial as well, what people like.
It is, yeah, and I also give them a chance to just tell me. There's always a question in the survey where they can tell me anything they want, and it's some of the most useful stuff comes from there. Also, of course, these are my fans, so that tends to be them telling me how much they enjoy my books, and that's great for the ego. Most authors tend to be quite introverted. And tend to, I certainly was like this back in the early days, lack confidence in their writing. And so if you want a big jolt of enthusiasm as you start the new year, this is something that you can really do. And I've had, we'll talk about this when we go through it, but I've had nearly 5,700 responses to the survey that I did this year, and loads of those comments have been fantastic for my confidence and give me the kick up the pants I need to get started with the writing this year.
Okay, before we get into the practicalities, I mean, the first thing to say is that's time consuming. 5,700 responses and you read them all.
Yeah. There's, with something like SurveyMonkey, which is the choice that I use, the app is very good, and you can just scroll through them quickly. I don't respond to them individually; that would just be impossible. And also, it's an anonymous survey, so people don't leave their email addresses. But it is very easy just to flick through them as you're got 10 minutes in a queue, or you're waiting on a train or something along those lines. It's easy to just kind of browse those. And you could do it at any time. I could look through them in February if I wanted to.
How big's your list now?
About 65,000.
So at what size of list do you need to do a survey?
I think any size. You could do it with 150 to start getting ideas about where you are. I mean, it'd be a little artificial for you because there's not much point asking details about your readers because you haven't got any readers yet because you haven't released anything. But you could certainly start to ask questions about what people are interested in, because there are going to be plenty of people there who will be your readers.
But for people a little bit ahead of me who've got a book or two out, but their list might still be small, they might be starting out in the whole list building, so maybe they've got 100 or 200 people on the list, it's still worth doing a survey.
Oh yeah, absolutely. All data is good data. I'm very much, and you should certainly get into that as soon as you can. It's fun. It's a chance. People quite like taking surveys, and SurveyMonkey is very easy. It's easy for you to create, and also easy for people to fill out. So I find putting it out there is I enjoy it. I think they enjoy it too. I also turn it into a competition, so I'll randomly give some prizes out. They could be signed books like some of the ones you've got behind you there, or the good prize is to give away a Kindle. So that's quite a valuable prize. But you can load those Kindles with your books, so you can kind of personalise it. I remember once Amazon at the London Book Fair last year gave me a Kindle, gave some authors, including me, who were speaking for them a Kindle, and then asked them to inscribe it with like some kind of dental thrill. Yeah. We basically completely buggered these Kindles up. And then they gave it to me, and actually I did give that away because it was kind
unique.
of a signed Kindle. It looked ridiculous.
I thought it was a mistake on the photograph that you were being asked to pose with a pen on a Kindle as a sort of joke, but it was
It wasn't a pen. It was a drill,
like a dentist.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was an inscription tool.
Yeah, so you can sign Kindles. People who do book signings must get people coming up with their Kindles and special pens these days.
You probably do it on a Sharpie, I guess, on the back. Yeah.
Okay, right. So can we get into some of the practicalities? You've given one thing away, which is SurveyMonkey is the software that you choose.
Before I forget, we'll do a PDF giveaway for this. So we will have all of the questions and all of the answers. Now, of course, it is very personal to me because these are my readers, but it's useful. The data that we're going to mention is very, very useful for everybody. Now, some of it will be very specific with just talking about my books, but things like what are people prepared to pay for a book? That's very useful for all authors, and we'll touch on that when we get to the question, and we can talk about it. But we'll also give that away, and that will be at selfpublishingformula.com/download.
Download 51.
Download 51. Yeah.
So did you say you're going to give away all the questions and all the answers?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to give away all your answers?
All the answers that I've received, the data.
Oh, okay. That's really interesting. I'd love to see that. So,
well, there you go.
Yeah, okay. So we'll give that URL again towards the end of the episode. That's going to be a highly sought after one, I think. So, how do we go about this?
Well, let's just go through the questions. We've got, let's have a look, about 12 questions, and not all of them will be relevant for everybody, but we'll skip over the ones that aren't relevant and we'll concentrate on the ones that are, just so that people can get an idea of what an audience might look like. Now remember, I'm writing thrillers, action-adventure thrillers, so that needs to be taken into account. If you're writing romance, you're going to get different kind of responses on the gender split, which is where we'll start. So the first question I ask is, are you male or female? And for me, the responses come back. This would be quite surprising, I think, for most people, given that I write those kinds of quite masculine books. You'd think that it would be quite a high proportion would be male, but the actual split is 65% male, 35% female. So a very big chunk of my audience is female.
It's female, yeah.
And that does allow me to then think about, okay, should I try running some Facebook ads just targeting women? Because that means I can start to write slightly different copy, focusing on different aspects of the series, of the character, perhaps more than the action, or lots of variations you can draw out there.
But I guess it also gives you the idea that within the survey questions you could ask women specifically, once they've said they're a woman, there's that possibility to branch the questions.
You can. So I don't do that. It is possible to
find out what they like about the books. I mean, the background to that, of course, is that women read more books than men. I mean, that is a global phenomenon, and women are the voracious consumers of books more than men. So from a commercial point of view, it's always worth thinking, even if you're writing thrillers, that there should be something in there for the female audience. This is not a gender stereotype, by the way. There might be lots of women who like the exactly same things in the book as men do, but there are also traits.
So the next question that I asked, so we've asked what gender the respondents are. The next question is, what is your age? So it's very interesting for me to know what the age of my readership is. That again will allow me to target my ads more effectively. And the split came back 0.09% were younger than 18. So I'm not selling many books to under 18-year-olds. Then 0.3% were 18 to 24, 5.7% were 25 to 40, and then we get into the huge majority are over 41. So 41 to 65 is 54%, and then 65 or older is 39%. So as a practical example of how that's helped me, when I originally started doing Facebook ads, you have the option to kind of to target your ads to certain ages. And the cutoff for Facebook is 65 and up. So you can't do 65 to 75, 75 to 85 so easily. The natural cutoff is 65. And I was originally reluctant to advertise to people in that bracket on the basis that I'm going to be catching 95-year-olds who probably don't read that much anymore. A bit of a generalization, but it's probably true. But that has just that survey question has demonstrated to me that is folly, because 40% of my audience are over 65. So that's a practical example of where I am. Also makes me slightly nervous.
People do live longer though, Mark.
I know, but just think, it's 40. So it's 94% of my audience is over 41. So I'm definitely, and obviously as people are getting older, they fall into that bracket again.
Yes, exactly.
And does that perhaps that means that people don't have time when they're younger to read so much, or it could mean slightly more worryingly they just don't read as much. So it's quite hard to say, but that was very useful for me.
There are a lot of distractions for today's younger people that weren't around when your 75-year-old was 20, that's for sure. But having said that, the populations are growing around the world, and particularly in some parts of the world. They're growing in Africa and South Asia, growing faster than they are here. Actually, I think they're declining slightly in Europe, aren't they? But nonetheless, I wouldn't worry too much about that. There's enough fish in the sea for you.
Yeah.
And from our point of view in the digital world, we just have to think how many people enter the digital world every day who weren't there before. So particularly in your demographic, I would think that's probably the fastest growing area of people. My dad's 80, actually he's 86 next month, and he joined Facebook last year. So that's that's how. So don't worry.
Yes, no, I feel much better now.
Okay.
So that was interesting. Now the next one I asked, again we're on the demographic questions at the moment, is where do you live? So the split there, again, this is very, very useful for me in terms of marketing. Also when I'm pitching books to other publishers, they might want to know what my platform is in different parts of the world. Now I'm obviously a UK author, but my audience is 60% in the US. It's 29% in the UK, and then 4% Canada, 3% Australia, then 5% other places. So that was interesting. I mean, I remember going back a few years, it was 90%, 10% UK, US, and I couldn't work out how to crack the American market, and I wanted to, obviously, because that's where most of the Kindle readers were in those days. And something happened. I think it was possibly the book that I released was quite international, quite Bondish in that way, and that seemed to be the ticket to enable me to get into the American market. And since then, as you see there, I mean, twice as many of my readers are in the US than are in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a dissimilar split from SPF, actually. SPF is slightly more slanted towards the US, but slightly ahead. Well, it's a bigger population as well, and slightly ahead in terms of, I think, digital take-up. Yeah. Probably in parts of the States.
Certainly in terms of Kindle, the Kindle, they're about a year ahead of us in the UK, and then places like Australia, Germany, a year behind the UK. So you can see a split. I would expect the UK to continue to grow. So those are the demographics. I think that's important to get those done. They're fundamentally important for lots of different reasons. But then we get into some stuff that will be very interesting, I think, to everybody. It doesn't really matter what you're writing. So the next question is, how did they discover me? Because I want to know where they found out about me, because I can do more of that and less of something else, perhaps. So we had an email from Amazon. Now, by that I mean Amazon algorithmically sending out emails to people who it thinks are going to like my books because they know what they've read before.
I've had them.
Yep, you will have done, and Amazon very, very good at pushing those out there. And 10% of the audience found me that way, so that was pretty good. Now, Amazon also bought, so those are the stripe on the sales pages of your books that will say authors or readers who bought this also bought this. So people perhaps say that they were looking for a Lee Child book or a David Baldacci book or Barry Eisler, whatever. They would have found on that page a link back to one of my Milton books. And 19% of the readers found me through that. So that was a pretty fruitful avenue for me. And this is great for our friends at BookBub. 21% of my audience, so that is in fact the biggest slice, found me through a BookBub ad.
Wow.
So I probably need to tell BookBub that. I think that'd be the kind of thing that they would be quite interested in. But,
was that the single biggest?
That's the single biggest. I mean, just ahead of Amazon also bought, but that was BookBub. So contextually, I probably run, I don't know exactly how many, I'd say probably about 20 BookBubs now. I was right there at the start, and although they knocked me back a fair bit, I get in probably more than I turn down. But that's a really good indication of, apart from the kind of the short-term benefit of immediate return on investment, 2 or 3 times what you spend on the ad, you're building audiences through that. They see the book at 99 cents or free through the ad, and then you hook them and they're back for more. So BookBub is a really that's the most important facet of a BookBub promotion, is not the short-term benefits, the long tail that you're trying to develop. So the other book recommendation services, so people like FreeBooksy, InstaFreebie and BookSends, those kinds of guys, 5% coming through that way. Okay, so the next source of people becoming aware of me was the thing that I'm most famous for, and that's Facebook ads. So 16.4% of the respondents came in through Facebook advertising. So that's pretty interesting. So actually less than BookBub. So BookBub is more, it has a bigger reach, and also, even though those ads are expensive, probably, I haven't actually sat down and worked this out yet, I imagine those would be cheaper leads than the ones I'm getting through Facebook.
Yeah. But
on the other hand, Facebook has just an almost infinite reach. So I'm not going to be chewing through Facebook ads anytime soon in terms of the people that I can find. And I can run a Facebook ad whenever I want. BookBub is going to tell me when and when I can't, but Facebook doesn't care. As long as I pay them, I can continue to run those ads.
Just to go back with this survey goes to your list.
Yeah.
So you're surveying people about being on your list, how they heard about you, etc. At this stage, it's possible that some of your respondents have never bought a book. It's probably unlikely that they'd reply to a survey to an author they'd never read, but it's possible. You're really talking about how you got onto the list, not how you bought my book.
No, exactly. This question is, how did you find out about me? So I can concentrate on optimizing those areas.
Yeah.
So the next one is, and I think this was a badly phrased question on my part, is you saw an ad on Amazon. So by that I mean an AMS ad, an Amazon Marketing Services ad, which we'll talk about on another podcast. And I've only really been running those for a couple of months. So I think people here think I'm talking about, say, an email out from Amazon. So I'm going to disregard that and kind of push it in with the other one. So I suppose when you that's 10%. When you put that together, Amazon does become the biggest source of referrals, which isn't that surprising.
Yeah.
And then there are 12% others, which we won't go into because they will take too long. But the final one for 5.6% is recommendation from a family or friend. So that's always going to be one of the most powerful forms of advertising, referral. That's a personal recommendation.
What size was that?
5.6%.
Okay, yeah.
So pretty good in terms of the chunk they're coming through. But that's very important. Okay, so again, another question 5 that will be relevant for all authors is what first attracted those readers to my books. So there are 4 things, and then another catch up, which we won't go into here. But in terms of people, that old cliche, cover is the most important thing. And I've been guilty of that too. And it is fundamentally important, I think, to you're not likely to get people to look at your offerings if your cover sucks. I think that's just a fact. But we might be putting a bit too much importance in that. So I'm certainly not saying don't worry about the cover too much because it's not as important as other stuff. Because that's not true necessarily. I think it's very, very important to do that, but we shouldn't overestimate it. Because when I ran that question and asked what was the thing that attracted people to my books, cover came back at 6.7%. So quite low down actually in terms of the hierarchy. The most important one, or the most influential one, was Blurb. So Blurb came in at 35%, so several times more influential than cover. Look Inside, so that's the free sample that you can get on Amazon. That came in at 21%. So that's pretty good. And then reviews was 26%. So the second biggest factor for people joining the list was because they saw the reviews that the books had, and that was the social proof they needed to make that decision to purchase.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? Because all those little bits and pieces that go around outside of actually writing the book, which some people are clueless about, quite understandably, because it's quite a complex area, and others have really understand the nitty-gritty of it. Most of us are somewhere in between. The sort of thing we spell out in our 101 course, by the way, in detail, but that's and for another day. But they are so important, all those bits, the bit at the back of your book, the bit at the front of your book. When you look at this survey and start to look at your income over a year and put those percentages against that, you sit down, how good is good Blurb? Well, you could quantify it, and it's worth a lot of money.
Yeah, and I'm prepared. I outsource now, so I get someone to make a first pass. Actually, Brian Cohen, who we've spoken to before, is very, very good at writing blurbs. He's got a good formula for those. I'll pay him a couple $100 to run to do the first pass at the blurb, and then I'll amend it. And I consider myself to be a pretty good copywriter, but it's one of those situations where I think it doesn't hurt if you have the funds to just get someone not connected to the book to make a first go at it. Just, oftentimes with Brian, I'll actually use his with minimal amendments. But even if I do cut it around a bit, it's great to have a starting point that's original that I haven't had a hand in.
Yeah.
So that's question 5. Question 6, so a little bit more specific to me. So I'll just kind of mention what the question was, and then people can have a look at the data in more detail if they want to in the free PDF we'll give away. It was, what is your favourite book by me? So the not surprisingly, when you think about this a little bit, the two biggest ones, certainly the biggest one is the first Milton book. So the reason, it's way ahead of all the others. It's let's have a look, 31% of respondents like The Cleaner, which is the first Milton book. Now the reason for that is that's part of my giveaway offer, so there's a lot of those out there. It's also the first in the series, so people, even if they if they read through the series, they will have read that one for sure. So it's not that surprising that it's had the most exposure. What is perhaps a little surprising is that is people's favourites, because I wrote that book when I was a less practiced writer than I am today, and I think the latter books are technically more proficient than the early ones, but that tends to be the one that comes back as the favourite.
It doesn't worry you at all that
No.
your books you've written subsequently aren't as good as the first book you wrote?
No, because the reason people can only tick one box, right? So there'll be an awful lot. Most of those people will only have read that book, so they can't tick anything else.
Yeah. Well, I suppose it's also, if you really like a series, and it's the same with a series of films, there's usually a kind of emotional, romantic association with the first one.
Yeah.
Whether it's Back to the Future or Star Wars or your first Milton book, that turns you on to the rest of them.
So it's interesting to look through the other answers. You see kind of the book that I would have considered to be not in, say, the top 5 of the series. This is the third in the series, called The Driver. Actually comes out as it's 7.6% of the audience, that was their favourite. So that is probably, it's like number 3, I think, in terms of the hierarchy of favoured books, which is there's good reason why sometimes you're not the best judge of how good your books are. Your audience will tell you what their favourite is, and so maybe what I can do from that kind of information is look back at what that story was about, and that book is a more contained story, more like the Equalizer episodes that The Cleaner was originally based on, so less globe-trotting, more one location with a more kind of realistic antagonist, and perhaps that's what my readers want. So maybe this year, in fact this year, I will be writing a book that's a bit more like that. So that's useful. And then just kind of really funny stuff. And the first book that I self-published was called The Black Mile, which was a long time ago now, and 0.8% of my audience like that. Still 43 people, 45 people, but we're nowhere near as popular as the Milton books are. So that's question 6. Question 7. This again is going to be useful for all authors, I think. Certainly to not necessarily the data, but why I ask the question and how I ask it, and then what you can do with the information you get back. So the question is, how many Mark Dawson books have you read? So the response comes back. I'll very, very quickly tell you what it is, because it's, as I say, it's more about why I ask. It's important about what I'm getting back. So I break it down to 1, 2 to 5, 6 to 10, or 11 to 14, or more than 15. And more than, let's just quickly run that. So more than 6 books, so from 6 upwards, it's about 60% of the audience. So the reason I ask that is because I want to know when I'm working out how much I should spend on acquiring a new reader. So to put it in kind of internet marketing language, a new lead. Because if I can work out how many they're likely to read once they start reading, I can then work out how much they're likely to spend, and I can work out what the median is, and then once I've got that information, I can work out how much I should spend to acquire them. And I mean, I go into this in a lot more detail in the advertising course, but once you have that kind of number, you can then make really educated decisions. And if you're on one side of the line with your ads, then you should continue to invest. If you're spending too much, then you should cut back and try and refocus and go the other way to try and make them a bit more efficient.
Did you ask if anyone hadn't read a book? Did it start at 1 to something?
Yeah, I should start with 1. So yeah, I should ask.
You
I
might
should
have
ask
some
0.
respondents. Yeah. My theory that someone's responded to your survey without reading a book.
I know that some do, because in some of the questions, some of the comments in the kind of the free text comment, I've maybe 3 or 4 said I haven't read any yet, but I'm looking forward to starting.
Okay. So that's. I mean, you've talked a lot in the past about the value of a lead, and although it does start to sound technical, people can start to see here exactly how you've extrapolated that figure and why you put so much effort in. And we read comments from people who are starting out in this path, people like myself who feel a little bit aimless, and should I be paying 50 cents? What I'm paying $1.50? Do I stop my campaign because $1.50 a lead is too much, and so on? But very quickly with this data, not very quickly, but at some point with this data, you've got the answers that you're looking for. And as you say, informed decisions, then everything starts to get better and better and more focused as you go on. Yeah,
and there are other ways to calculate what it's called read-through. And you can look at your relative sales numbers for the books in the series and try and see trends developing there. I think that's a bit unscientific, because people can come in on book 3 without reading book 1 and book 2, so its read-through is a little bit ambiguous. Asking this kind of question specifically is a much more accurate way of finding out what your subscribers are worth to you.
Okay,
so speaking about worth, the next question, so this is question 8, is what do you think a typical Mark Dawson book is worth? So now this is valuable for all indies, because we do tend to as we've mentioned this before, we do tend to suggest that our books should be worth less than a traditionally published book, and we tend to be nervous about charging a little more than perhaps we ought to. So the answer to that was I kind of put all the options down. 99 cents, that's the first one. 2.8% of the audience responding said that was what they thought my books were worth. $1.99 is 6.6%, $2.99 12%, $3.99 16%, $4.99 19%, $5.99 16%, and then the biggest one of all, more than $5.99 25%.
Wow! So
I would say a good starting point for an indie author is, I'd say $3.99 is about the right price. I tend to price now at $4.99 or $5.99. I don't go higher than that unless it's a box set, in which I'll go up to $10. But if you think about that, $3.99, so that's 35, 45, 51, 76% of the respondents would pay more, or think the book is worth more than $3.99.
But the biggest single one there is more than $4.99.
$5.99.
$5.99. And you won't price above that.
No, I won't. I think you probably could, and there are some authors. There's an author called Elizabeth West who is in the community. She has done really well at $9.99, and of course, even at $9.99, we're still underpricing by a considerable amount what the traditional publishers will charge for an ebook. The new Reacher book is going to cost you $16 or $17 in ebook, which frankly is a bit insulting. But
don't say that. We're trying to get Lee Child on here.
It's not his fault. I'm sure he'd be happy to charge a little less, but it's a publishing tactic to maintain print. But from a reader, you have a tangible item in a book that you can put on your bookshelf or a file. It doesn't seem right that one should be much more than the other. But anyway, that's interesting for me, and it's just what I'd like people to take away from that is just be confident about charging a little more and feeling that you don't need to be stuck in that 99-cent ghetto and being unhappy about charging more than that.
Yeah.
So what would you charge for your book?
Well, of course, it's my very first book and it's going to be effectively a lead magnet, but I have been thinking about charging 99 cents. I mean, partly because I've had so many people saying, I can't wait to buy your book, and they want to buy it to support me. So there's going to be an initial bit of that, and rather than give it away, I actually feel that they should be able to buy it just because they want to feel that they've contributed to my career at the beginning, which is great. In longer term, my bigger audience who I don't know yet and who are purely judging me on the book, I've got to make a decision about whether I stick with 99 cents before I've got anything else to give away, or whether I give it away, and I haven't.
Well, for a first-time author, I think you'd be looking to give it away. I think there's not much point in charging 99 cents because the actual amount you're making 30 cents on the dollar.
So a third of a coffee from the cheap cafe. So
not huge, but what you can do, and then a subscriber is going to be worth much more to you in the long term, especially if you want to write 4 books by 2018, as I think I read on the blog post last night. Yeah. So that would be something that you need to think about.
I have got some questions about that, but we'll come back to it as its own area, isn't it? Pricing and so on. And perhaps we'll get somebody on to talk specifically about pricing.
Yeah, we could.
Because I've got quite a few questions as I approach that point. So anyway, go on.
Okay, so question 9. How do you read your books? So what's the format that's most popular with my readers? So print comes in at 3.9%. So that's about right. I don't push print too hard. Amazon do... they're all available in print. So I probably make about $1,000 a month, I'd say, in terms of print sales. Perhaps a touch less than that, but it's small in the grand scheme of things. Amazon Kindle comes in at a whopping 66%. Very interesting. Barnes & Noble Nook 2.55%, Apple 12%, Android 6%, and Kobo 2%. So small when you think about them individually, apart from Apple, which is 12% of my revenue. But when you combine them, you're looking at about 20% there. So that's useful for me when we'll get onto Kindle Unlimited in a minute. But if I was to go exclusively with Amazon again, and I have been before, I would immediately be turning off 20% of my audience. So I'd need to know that Kindle Unlimited could make up that shortfall. And there's no guarantee of that. So I've spent a lot of time working on my relationships with those retailers, especially with Apple, and you can see that that is something that has borne fruit now.
Yeah.
So, and then audiobook comes in at 2%, and then other is 4.2%. But audiobook, that's an area that's definitely growing. I'm doing quite well with Audible. I think one of the biggest selling indie authors on Audible, at least in the UK. And that's accounting for a fairly small percent of the market, but there's a lot of potential for growth there.
And there are presumably higher costs associated with audiobooks.
Well, in the sense that there's a production involved, technically yes, you'd be right in thinking that, but there are ways to get around that. So I sell my books to Audible Studios because for me, I've probably mentioned this before, it makes more sense to me to have them produce the books and then have skin in the game when it comes to
selling them.
Skin in the game. You've never heard that before?
No. So it sounds quite rude.
Skin in the game just means that you are invested in... You're invested as I am.
You've got dog in the fight.
Dog in the fight. There you go. Exactly. So they've got a dog in the fight too. So it makes sense for them to promote something that they've made too. So the other way, of course, is through using ACX. So that's Audiobook Creation Exchange, which is another Amazon company, but basically hooks up authors on the one hand with producers and narrators on the other hand, and you can do that on a profit share where you're not out of pocket at all. So that can work really well. So there's another option there. But yeah, audiobooks is definitely going to be one of the big growth areas as we go into the rest of the year.
Yeah, okay. But again, you can quantify this because you can look at exactly how many you've sold and how much you've spent and how much you're actually getting from it. So.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so question 10, getting to the end now, actually. A very simple question with a yes/no answer. Are you in Kindle Unlimited? So Kindle Unlimited, most people will know what that is. It's basically the Kindle. It's a subscription service whereby you pay, I think it's £10 or $10 a month, and you can borrow books. The Netflix model works very well, and Amazon pays you on a pages per read basis, so something like 0.0045 cents per read, which sounds minuscule, but when you have 1 million reads, 1 million pages read, suddenly it can be worth a lot. And those authors that we met in in St. Petersburg, people like Lindsay Hall, who are doing very significant amounts of money, most of that will be coming through KU. So the answer from my survey, so are you in it or not? Yes was 20% and no was 79%. So the great majority are out. And remember, just linking that back to that question I said before, where is my audience based? And there's an awful lot on other platforms. 20% of my audience is on non-Amazon platforms. So that makes me think, if I'm gaining perhaps 20% of the audience are on KU, still quite a lot for me to make up in order to make that cost neutral switch.
Yes.
So
and the point here is that if you go into Kindle Unlimited, there's an exclusivity.
Yes, you've got to be exclusive. You couldn't be on those other platforms. Of course, the other benefit is that it's effectively a new marketplace, a new very big marketplace with lots of other readers who wouldn't buy my books. They're only interested in the subscription model. So potentially you can reach thousands and thousands more. Would I make more money by going that way? Maybe, it's possible. Would I feel more secure knowing that all my eggs are in one basket? Definitely not. So that's the things you have to weigh up.
So you have a silly question. Some books in KU and some books out of KU, and that's completely normal and up to you?
Yeah, you don't. It's not per author, it's per book. So I've got, I think, all my Amazon Thomas and Mercer books are available in KU, as you'd expect. They're owned by Amazon now, so they're going to put them in their programs. I've got 3 books. The 3 original Soho Noir books are all exclusive to Amazon because they did me a year-long special deal to put them exclusive in return for some promotion. Now that deal's expired, I'll probably put them wide again. So then this is a very interesting question for authors who have mailing lists and then don't know what they should do with the subscribers that they've got on the list. Specifically, how often should they be communicating with list members? So I ask, again, another simple question. How frequently would you like to hear from me? And the answers come back with just when there's a new book, 35% of the time, 35% of the audience. Once a week, thank God this one didn't win because there's no way I'd be able to manage this, but 10% would like to hear from me once every week. Once a month is the winner with 46.69%, and twice a month gets 7%. So I've kind of settled on the once a month model, and I have been guilty over the last year or so of not hitting that, and that's because I've just been so busy with everything else. But I am trying to maintain that kind of monthly contact with my readers now. And there'll usually be something to say. So I've just got the first Milton box set is just only recently been available in print. So I did a mail out to the list last week just saying that. I had the survey responses, so I emailed out about that. And then next month on the 15th there'll be a new book release to go out. So I can maintain a monthly basis. Weekly, I think I'm just going to be talking about the weather, so probably not going to be that interesting.
And do you broadcast emails? I mean, in the sense that you will once a month sit down, write an email and send it to your list?
Yeah. Or
would you sit down and write the next 6 months worth of emails and schedule them?
No, there'd be broadcasts. So that would be another. You could put it on an autoresponder, but then if you're writing something that's dependent on the time, so you might say it's summer in Salisbury, but those emails could go out in the winter to people who've just joined your list. So you're slightly hamstrung by how flexible you can be.
Yeah. Okay.
I think autoresponders and automation sequences are best as you onboard people. So talking about stuff that isn't dependent on anything other than the books that you're giving them and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so getting towards the end now. So I ask, what would you be most excited about in 2017? So again, this is helping me to work out what I should be writing more of and less of. And 70% of people want more Milton, Isabella Rose 11%, Beatrix Rose 7%, Soho Noir 2.35%, and a new series. So when I'm thinking of writing, and I've actually got planned out and might start to write this year, 10% of people were interested in something new. So that's interesting too.
Did you tell them what the idea was?
No.
Say something new.
Something, just a new series.
I'm a little surprised there's such a big gap between John Milton and Isabella Rose.
Well, there are 10 Milton books, 2 novellas, 3 box sets, and I've never advertised the Isabella Rose series. That's an Amazon exclusive.
Never advertised. Oh, because
there's not much point in me advertising that. The margins are much smaller because I get 30% rather than 70%. So it doesn't make much sense for me to do that. So if you think about the Milton books, I have no idea. I could work it out quite easily what the impressions have been over the course of the last 2 years. And impressions, that's the number of times an ad has been served. It'll be in the millions, probably about 10 million now, probably something like that. So it's much, much better known, that series. But 10% of a 65,000 size mailing list is decent. That's not bad at all. So that does quite neatly work out what I want to focus on this year. There will be more Milton, at least this one in February. There'll be one directly after that, probably another one towards the end of the year. There'll be another Isabella Rose book, and I might, if I get time, depending on all kinds of things, write this first book in the new series that I'm thinking of. But being able to validate that, get that kind of pre-writing approval from your audience is quite a useful thing to know. I know, for example, that if I wanted to do a new series, at least 10% of my audience would like me to do that. So, and you can probably extrapolate from that. Another 20% will buy it for sure. And so it's going to be a worthwhile exercise, whatever I decide to do.
Yeah. Good. Any more questions?
Well, that's it really. So we kind of just mopped up with is there anything you'd like Mark to know? And you'll get. It's quite funny. I just saw a couple here. We had one guy said sometimes it's not all praise, which is great. I want it to be honest. So sometimes it's evident that you haven't visited a location. Just researched it. E.g., your book set in Australia had so many errors it grated. Perhaps get a native of the country to proof it as well. Well, I haven't been to Australia, and I have had a native of the country, in fact several, checked it and were happy with it. But obviously I didn't get everything right. But then we had, where are we? We had one, The Sword of God. I was very impressed with the accuracy of the Upper Peninsula settings. That's in Michigan, which I'm very familiar with because I haven't been there either. So it just goes to show that sometimes you're going to get it right. Sometimes readers will think you got it wrong.
Right, and then you need to go to Phnom Penh.
Yes, I haven't been to Phnom Penh either, strangely enough.
I thought that as you were walking across the main park in the square, because I thought, when I was there doing some work for the regime, it was different. But look, there's a general point to make here as well, which is an obvious thing, which is clearly you've got very valuable data, empirical evidence that you can use to make informed decisions in the future. For those 5,700 people who already feel that they're, part of your community, that's a better connection with them as well. And each time you do an exercise like this, you talk a lot about turning fans into super fans and super fans into really amazing close fans.
Yeah,
that's part of this as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just another. It's demonstrating that I'm listening, right, which is great. And a number of times, I mean, in the thousands of comments that I've gone through, the number of times that has come through, and that people appreciate that I ask and love the connection that they have with me, because the number of times you'll hear people say, I've never had a connection with an author like this before. It's amazing, and it doesn't take very long to do that. These are not difficult things to work out, and they don't need to be expensive. It's just common sense, really, just reaching out and making connections.
Yeah.
And that turns them into people who are likely to, as we saw from that question, will buy on average 8 of my books. My books cost, say, $5. You do the math.
40 something, yeah. No, that's great, and it's the right way to do business, to think of yourself as a business, and this is exactly what you'll find big companies will be doing all the time. In fact, we're slightly plagued by them in this day and age. I have to say, that's the other side of being a consumer. It's very difficult to visit a website without something popping up saying, have you got time to take our survey? And you have to pick and choose how much time you have on those fronts. You've been referring a lot, if you're watching this on the YouTube version, you'll see that Mark's been referring to his laptop a lot through this. So that information, everything there all that the data that he's been referring to is available to you to download if you go to selfpublishingformula.com/download51. And you will be able to get all of that really, really interesting stuff. And there'll be stuff in there, particularly as you mentioned at the beginning, the pricing that could be of value to you in your own books. But it'll certainly give you an idea of, in Mark's case, what is the ideal, not quite the ideal survey for you, because you said you did get one of the questions wrong and you need to refine that in the future. But great. Yeah, I've really enjoyed that. It's been very interesting.
Good. Mission accomplished. Excellent.
To make it interesting to me. Yeah. Good. Excellent. Don't forget, you can get all our podcasts at selfpublishingformula.com. You can subscribe to us via iTunes. Leave a review if you'd like. That would be great if you can. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel and you can watch us in glorious colour as well. We're going to be back next week. I want to wish you well this week. That URL again to download the survey information, selfpublishingformula.com/download51. Have a great week, Mark.
You too, James.
And have a great week, you. Goodbye.
You've been listening to the Self-Publishing Formula podcast. Visit us at selfpublishingformula.com for more information, show notes, and links on today's topics. You can also sign up for our free video series on using Facebook ads to grow your mailing list. If you've enjoyed the show, please consider leaving us a review on iTunes. We'll see you next time.